What would Immanuel Kant say about the Russia-Ukraine war? In particular, how would he explain that it happened and what normative guidance would he give regarding how interested parties, including European countries, should handle the crisis? It is always dangerous to use the thoughts of great figures of the past to interpret current events, and even more dangerous to become their alleged official voice. After all, Kant is not ChatGPT, and in fact, if you ask this artificial intelligence platform what Kant would have said, it replies, quote, Kant did not specifically address the Russia-Ukraine war as it took place long after his lifetime. However, we can attempt to apply some of Kant's principles and ideas to gain insight into how he might have approached the situation. Then, ChatGPT continues by saying that given his commitment to international law and the pursuit of perpetual peace, he, quote, would likely emphasize the importance of respecting the sovereignty of states and argue that no state has the right to interfere forcefully in the affairs of another state without just cause. And in the case of the Russia-Ukraine war, he might condemn any violation of Ukraine's territory and advocate for the protection of its sovereignty. Leaving aside whether artificial intelligence is right on how Kant would have evaluated the war, and I believe that its guess is alarmingly correct, what ChatGPT does not say is how Kant would explain the fact that the war happened in the first place. In fact, Kant was not so interested in spelling out moral principles that could help us to decide who is right and who is wrong in a conflict. This is what the natural law tradition that shaped the modern notions of jus ad bellum and jus in bello was most interested in. Kant, however, thought that despite their great intellectual merits, Grotius, Vattel, and Pufendorf are nothing but, quote, sorry comforters. For Kant, the most important question about war is not when it is right, if ever, but what causes it and how it can be avoided and eliminated, possibly forever, from human affairs. Famously, Kant thought that the way we can achieve or at least approximate perpetual peace is by introducing three major institutional reforms at the level of domestic, international, and cosmopolitan law. 1. National regimes should all become republics, understood as regimes in which the government pursued a common good and not the good of some private individuals or groups, and that powers, that is, legislative, executive, and judiciary powers, are strictly separated. 2. States should adhere to a supranational institution in the form of a world republic or of a federation of states. And 3. National states should respect cosmopolitan right, understood as a right bestowed on every human being to visit foreign countries without being treated with hostility. These three reforms, explains Kant, promote the cause of peace through three different mechanisms meant to work together to maximize efficacy. If a state is republican, the people whose will and interests shape governmental decision will hesitate greatly before embracing a war that may incur them in high cost. Why a war doesn't usually cost anything to a despot. Moreover, a republic, being committed to freedom of the press, will always host an unconstrained public debate about the opportunity to wage war, remaining open to protests of dissenting citizens. The second mechanism is that a supranational institution will diminish the security dilemma by offering, at the very minimum, permanent channels of diplomacy and, if provided with some coercive powers, by overcoming the lawless condition of international relations. Thirdly, the right to visit will enable economic and perhaps also cultural interdependencies among states that will make wars among them less likely. The spirit of commerce, says Kant, is incompatible with war, and a common conscience that unites people around some basic common natural principles can be further strengthened by leaving frontiers, if not fully open, at least porous. Now let us try to read the Russia-Ukraine war through the lenses of these three articles and corresponding mechanisms. Even a cursory look reveals some important facts. Russia and Ukraine were part of at least two major international organizations, the UN and the Council of Europe, although on March 26, 2022, Russia was expelled from the Council of Europe as a consequence of its aggression, and had a lot of economic and cultural interdependencies. Moreover, relatively the same can be said, except perhaps about cultural interdependencies, of the relation that Russia maintained with most of the countries that are now supporting Ukraine's resistance. This means that 2 out of 3 of Kant's definitive article seem to have been unable to prevent war. What then, at least in a Kantian perspective, is the real cause of that war? Quite obviously, it's the despotic nature of the Russian government. In Russia, powers are not separate. There is no freedom of the press. One person and his friends act as if they were the owners of the state. Putin and other oligarchs, by controlling natural resources, own the state in a non-metaphorical sense. Now that for Kant the ultimate cause of war is despotism is hardly surprising. The fact that the republican nature of governments occupy the first definitive article is no coincidence. Like in many constitutions, the earlier an article comes in the list, the more important it is. After all, what clearly differentiates Kant from preceding peace projects, most notably that of the Abbé Saint-Pierre, is precisely the attention to the non-despotic nature of national government. Despotism is the first, although not the sole, cause of war. And yet, Kant thought that we cannot remove despotism from the outside with a coerced democratization, even if we could. To use the words of Vladimir Kara-Murza, the dissident recently condemned to 25 years of jail by the Russian tribunal just for opposing the war, we can only hope that Moscow will soon be free of dictators.